If you've been around anime and manga circles over the past few years, you've probably heard of the rise in popularity of fantasy anime, with two in particular, those being Frieren and Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, being the most prominent. And neither one of them is an isekai, a story in which the main character is sent to another world. Usually, not all the time, such a premise leads to shallow wish fulfillment, mediocre writing, and lots of fantasy cliches. In fact, those can come about even if it isn't an isekai. These two manga and their anime adaptations are both very good and very unique takes on many common fantasy tropes, including classical fantasy races like elves and dwarves. All of this is good for fans of animation and fantasy, but there is one other fantasy manga with a similar level of prestige that has yet to be adapted, though by all accounts, the anime is inevitable. It's just been delayed. That manga, of course, is Hat Atelier. If you're a fan of the Disney TVA cartoon series The Owl House, like myself, you may have heard of an exchange that went on between Hat Atelier mangaka Shirahama Komome and Owl House creator Dana Terrace on Twitter, in which Shirahama-sensei made a piece of Owl House fan art that Dana Terrace loved and immediately recommended Hat Atelier to anyone who enjoys a queer, heart-racing story of empathy and self-discovery. Descriptors that could also be applied to the Owl House. And after watching all of the Owl House, I knew I had to give Witch Hat a try, and I can safely say, Dana's right. But that's only the tip of the iceberg with this series. Hat Atelier quickly became one of my all-time favorite manga, and my personal favorite of the recent Big 3 fantasy manga. Seriously, this manga has incredible art, incredible characters, and incredible world building. It's an absolute 10 out of 10 near-perfect masterpiece that I cannot wait for more of. The fact that it has so many similarities with one of my all-time favorite Western cartoons is just the icing on the cake. So I'm gonna go over both of them in this video, though I'm going to focus more on Witch Hat since I'm guessing most of you watching are familiar with the Owl House. But if you're a fan of either one of these stories, there's a good chance you'll enjoy the other. Both feature girls who long for a life full of magic but think it's impossible at first until something happens that rips them from their normal life into a world full of magic and witches. Both of them are enamored by the possibility in front of them until they come to understand that witch society has its fair share of problems and restrictions. Fortunately, both of them land a mentor witch who is more on the rebellious side. Neither of them can use magic at first, though through ingenuity and their own talents, they figure out how to do so by drawing a circle, and they set out on many new adventures where they befriend and help many new people that help them in turn when they need it. Similar in broad strokes, yes, but when we get to the fine details, the differences become much more pronounced. To anyone who's unfamiliar with the Owl House or hasn't watched it in a long time, I'll give you a quick rundown. 14-year-old Luz Noceda is not in a good place at school. She's known as the troublemaker of the school in that she's a total wild card. Her bizarre tendencies have scared off and in some cases seriously harmed her classmates. She doesn't fit in, and it's even been stated by Dana Terrace that she has ADHD. Her mom tries to send her to reality check summer camp, but before she can be picked up, she follows a suspicious-looking owl which takes her through a portal to a fantasy world filled with magic, demons, and of course, witches. After some shenanigans and a prison break, she has the chance to just go home, but turns it down in favor of staying with the outcast witch Ida the Owl Lady and her best friend, King of Demons. I mean, he is voiced by Alex Hirsch, he definitely could be the King of Demons. As they avoid the authorities, and she becomes acquainted with witch society. Things start like that, but they progress as Luz gets to know the people of the Boiling Isles, and she helps them with their problems, even if they're mean to her at first. Then, she starts to make her first true friends, she figures out a way to cast magic despite not having the necessary anatomy that witches have naturally, and she discovers just how messed up the Boiling Isles government is. And that's about as much as I can say without going into spoilers. I started watching this show to spite Disney for canceling their best portrayal of LGBTQ characters, and yes, I know that's not the reason why the show was canceled, but it was still canceled for stupid reasons, and Disney has never been good about letting LGBTQ characters get the time of day they deserve. But as the show went on and mysteries gave way to cavernous lore, character quirks gave way to powerful growth, and the stakes got bigger and bigger, I slowly fell in love with it. Even with the shortened third season, it's one of my absolute favorite cartoons. I mean it, I'm talking top 3 alongside Avatar even. It then paved the way for me to watch more cartoons from Disney TVA, including its sister show Amphibia, which I hope to make a video on someday, when that comic series is out. And with all that established, let's get to Witch Hat Atelier. Witch Hat Atelier begins with this little girl named Coco who, unlike Luce, lives in a world where magic is real. Coco dreams of being able to use it someday, but she can't because in this world, magic can only be used by witches who are born with the ability. So the best Coco can hope for is to marvel at a few witches and magical devices that happen to pass by her home, until the day that a witch named Kifre passes through and he offers to fix a broken carriage. Against his wishes, Coco sneaks in to see how the casting process works. Much to her surprise, the secret to casting magic is drawing. Then she realizes that the picture book a mysterious stranger gave her with a pot of ink is actually a book of magic, and the pictures are really instructions on how to use it. Overjoyed to cast her first spell, Coco immediately experiments with more spells, but when she completes a particularly complex one, Kifre comes back and carries her into the air as Coco's spell ravages her home and turns her mother into a statue. It turns out magic can be used by anyone with a pot of magic ink and a drawing pen, but that secret is kept secret for a pretty damn good reason. Years ago, in the Age of Magic, every king was a sorcerer and every person could create their own army. People could be annihilated or even transformed just on the whims of a single individual. So the times changed and a new order of witches rose up to restrict the use of magic to those who already know the secret and are born into existing magic-keeping families. And many, many magic spells are outlawed. For example, spells that alter the body, including healing magic, are outlawed, with the lone exception of a spell used to erase all traces of magic from a person's memory. Witches who believe in this order are called the Pointed Caps, because they believe in not hiding their faces from the people. Witches who disagree and would prefer that magic were permitted to be used more freely are called the Brimmed Caps. Kifre contemplates wiping Coco's memory until he realizes that she's his only link to the Brimmed Cap that gave her the magic book, and the spell that petrified her mother. So he gives her the chance to become his apprentice, studying magic so she can gain access to the magical world, and maybe even find a copy of the book she used so she might find the spell that turned her mother and possibly bring her back one day. Now that is one hell of an opener for this story. A fascinating premise with unlimited potential that hooks you right into its world and its characters. You want to see Coco save her mom. You want to find out more about this world. You have many questions about how magic works, and you get the feeling that the world is going to change. Kifre brings Coco to his atelier, where she meets his 3 other apprentices, the determined and blunt Agate, the cheerful free spirit Tetia, and the independent and solitary Riche. There's also Kifre's friend and occasional teaching assistant Ulrugio, and this series' obligatory cute mascot character, the brush buddy Coco finds in one of the early chapters. Each apprentice and Ulrugio is a fully developed character in their own right, with their own style of magic, their own individual challenges, and their own reasons for coming to the atelier. And Coco gets to know them all because, much like Luce, she's a beacon of unending love. This is technically a seinen manga, but Coco often felt more like a shonen protagonist to me due to her younger age and how idealistic she is. When Kifre tells her his philosophy as a witch, that being, magic exists to make people happy, she embraces it wholeheartedly. When someone comes along with a problem, Coco will do her best to find a solution, but she isn't one note by any means. Indeed, she's full of anxiety behind all that happiness, anxiety that she may never be able to save her mother, and she's racked with guilt because of the mistake she made. Fortunately, she has the support of her teachers and her friends to help her through this. Most of the recurring side characters are similarly complex, especially Kifre. This is still very much a seinen manga, every bit as deep as, say, Dungeon Meshi. But Shirohama Sensei has a different view of the demographic, seeing it as a grab bag of ideas. Thus, when she got the chance to create this story, she made it aimed at an older male audience, but made in such a way that it appeals to a wide audience. I absolutely love this about Witch Hat Atelier. Maybe I say this because I'm non-binary, or even because I'm specifically bi-gender, and I enjoy media aimed at all sorts of audiences across demographics regarding gender and even age. As the piece of shonen trash that I am, I love Coco's idealism and her cheerful attitude. As someone who recently warmed up to shoujo manga, I love how intimate the character reactions can get when they need to. As a fan of Western fantasy, even epic fantasy, I love the complex world building, gray morality, and themes. I also adore the magic system. In fact, let's get to that next. Magic in this world is kind of terrifying. It honestly reminds me of Earthsea or even Fullmetal Alchemist, the latter of course being another high fantasy manga written by a woman with a male target demographic that involved the protagonists messing up a magic spell cast by drawing a circle that destroyed their loved ones' bodies. Insert Doofenshmirtz meme here. Magic is super dangerous if not handled with the utmost care. It's cast using a combination of sigils and signs, and how they are drawn affects how the spell is cast. Sigil determines the element used, signs determine how it will form, and closing a circle around the seal completes the spell. But stemming from those simple rules blossoms infinite possibilities around sigil and sign combinations, orientations, or even proportions. It quickly becomes clear that Coco and her fellow apprentices have a lot to learn. But they are learning. Even Coco, who is a newcomer to this world, enthusiastically dives into whatever challenge is in front of her. And a lot of the time, she succeeds, not by creating a new spell out of the blue or possessing some special gift for magic that no one else does, but by creatively applying the spell components she, and to a lesser extent the audience, knows. Magic in this world is also heavily individualized, due to its reliance on creativity. Every witch has their own skills, their own specialization in specific positions within this world, like how Kifre specialized in water manipulation due to his hydrophobia. The magic system not only allows the audience to fantasize about what they would do with it, it also allows the audience to imagine potential solutions to problems. This is the mark of a great power system, and the people who use that power are just as interesting. The pointed cap witches are very well defined and diverse, as I've already discussed, but the brim caps, who find the laws on the use of magic to be needlessly restrictive, are just as fascinating, albeit much more mysterious. Recklessly using their magic to show the pointed caps what it can do when it is used without restraint. Two very dangerous results. But in many ways, they do have a point. Magic could help a lot of people who can't afford or make do with existing solutions. Just in the portion of the series that exists today, we see everything from portaling between locations, entire cities built beneath the ocean, flying cavalry, instantaneous fixing of complex objects, many injuries that could cripple or kill the average person, would mean nothing to a witch, natural disasters or mass destruction could be easily repaired from, or even prevented, etc. But that runs the risk of more harm being caused by that level of power falling into the wrong hands. But again, there are still benefits to skirting the rules. By the letter of the law, Coco should have had her memory erased, but with it still intact, she's done a lot of good for her friends, and even people who come into her life with problems that she helps them with. And even beyond her introduction to the world, Coco often wants to do more than she is technically permitted to do and has to weigh the pros and cons of doing so. Coco does her best to stay within the bounds of the law, but it's a balancing act. The manga is relatively early in its story, and is still ongoing, so the answers to these questions are still up in the air. But I'm very intrigued to see where exactly Coco decides to draw that very straight line. One last thing before we move on, and that's the artwork. This manga has arguably the best artwork I've ever seen. Shirahama Kamome might just be my favorite mangaka in terms of artwork. There are other mangakas whose art I love for specific reasons: Akira Toriyama's paneling, Hirohiko Araki's character design, Eiichiro Oda's world, and Kohei Horikoshi's action. But Shirahama-sensei above any of them offers the most complete package. Honestly, I recommend anyone who's remotely interested to give this manga a read. Even if the anime comes out and ends up being a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, a lot of it is going to be lost in translation. The art of the characters and the world is absolutely gorgeous, and the paneling has a surprisingly surreal, almost ethereal feel to it. Paneling is a language all its own on top of the artwork, and in this series it's easily the best I've seen in manga. Characters often interact with the paneling, and the way some of them are framed honestly feels like the kind of creativity only seen in single art pieces, rather than a full manga chapter. And seriously, just look at it! Shirahama-sensei apparently draws all of it traditionally, by the way. Yeesh. Which Hat Atelier really is the complete package, and I hope I've managed to communicate why it's my favorite of the fantasy manga big three. And I do very much enjoy the other two and may make videos on them in due time. Funnily enough, when asked how she felt about her manga being considered part of the fantasy big three, Shirahama said she had never heard of the term before, but she does enjoy Free Ren and Dungeon Meshi. As for this video, I will say that I love that each of these manga took traditional Western fantasy tropes and did something very different with them. Frierin's themes about time and change, Dungeon Meshi's fantastical ecology, and Witch Hat's examination of the idea of magic as a learned ability and even an art form. Fantasy is a genre plagued with tropes and cliches, much like anime, and how much an author relies on them without adding anything of their own can reveal how much work they've done on their plot, characters, and world. But, as these three demonstrate, the opposite can also show just how far they are willing to go, how unique and original the story is, and the impact it may leave on the cultural zeitgeist. It may even alter the industry in its own right, but only time will tell. For the time being, as a fantasy lover and an animation lover, I am very happy with all of this. And I hope that Hat Atelier one day gets the love and attention it deserves. Maybe this video has convinced you to take the plunge and get ahead of the curve. Because, much like a certain professional shitbag in his mother's basement, I really cannot recommend the totally unjustified feeling of superiority that comes with that enough. I'm Kylan Mythos, and I'll see you all next time.